He had nothing but his heart, and in America, that was never enough. She was born into a world where skyscrapers bowed to her last name and people smiled because they were paid to. When their paths crossed, it wasn't supposed to mean anything, just a glance, just a moment. But love doesn't ask permission. Every time he held her hand, he felt the weight of $1 billion pushing him away. Her father saw him as dirt beneath polished shoes, a mistake that needed to be erased before it embarrassed the family empire. Warnings turned into threats, whispers into public humiliation. Friends disappeared, doors closed, dreams collapsed. Yet the boy stayed, not because he was brave, but because loving her was the only thing that made him feel alive. In a country where power buys silence and money writes the rules, he learned a painful truth. Love can be pure, but it is never safe when it stands in the path of a billionaire. He grew up in the forgotten corners of America, where broken sidewalks and unpaid bills were more familiar than dreams. His childhood was shaped by scarcity, empty refrigerators, eviction notices taped to doors, and a mother who worked double shifts just to keep the lights on. While other kids talked about college tours and family vacations, he learned how to survive. He learned which stores threw away food late at night, how to stretch a single dollar for days, and how to smile even when humiliation burned inside his chest. Poverty didn't just take money from him. It took confidence, safety, and the belief that he belonged anywhere. Every morning, he watched the city wake up from the bus window, staring at glass towers that reflected sunlight like promises never meant for people like him. He worked wherever he could, washing dishes, carrying boxes, cleaning offices after midnight. His hands were always tired, his back always sore, but his heart still carried quiet dreams. He wanted more than survival. He wanted dignity. He wanted a life where love wasn't a luxury item only the rich could afford. People rarely noticed him, and when they did, it was with judgment. Torn shoes, cheap clothes, the unspoken assumption that he would never rise above his situation. He learned to keep his head down, to avoid places where wealth gathered, because those places reminded him of everything he lacked. Still, sometimes he paused outside expensive buildings, imagining what life felt like on the other side of those guarded doors. Not the money, but the freedom. Despite the hardship, he carried strong values. He believed in honesty, loyalty, and hard work, even when the world showed him none in return. Love, to him, wasn't about status or advantage. It was about understanding, sacrifice, and standing beside someone even when you had nothing to offer but your presence. That belief came from watching his mother endure exhaustion without complaint, loving her children despite having nothing left to give. Loneliness followed him everywhere. Friends drifted away, ashamed of his circumstances or too busy chasing their own success. Nights were the hardest, when the city glittered outside his small room and reminded him how invisible he was. He often wondered if someone like him was allowed to dream of love at all, or if that too was reserved for people born into comfort. He never imagined his life would collide with the billionaire world. He never planned to challenge power, money, or influence. All he wanted was a chance to be seen as human, not a statistic, not a failure, not a poor boy struggling at the bottom. And when fate quietly placed him on a path towards someone from a world built on unimaginable wealth, he didn't realize that this fragile hope would soon become the greatest test of his life. She was born into a world where her name opened doors before she even spoke. Private jets, gated mansions, and headlines followed her from childhood, shaping her life long before she understood what any of it meant. To the public, she was America's golden girl, the billionaire's daughter with perfect manners, flawless style, and a future already written in contracts and expectations. But behind the polished image was a life carefully controlled, measured, and monitored. Every step she took was watched. Every decision required approval. Her father didn't believe in ordinary happiness. He believed in power, legacy, and domination. Love, in his world, was a weakness unless it could be used as leverage. From a young age, she was taught that emotions were dangerous, and trust was earned only through wealth and influence. Friends were chosen for her. Schools were selected to protect the family name. Even her smile felt rehearsed, trained to never reveal too much. Luxury surrounded her, yet loneliness filled every corner. She lived in enormous rooms that echoed with silence, surrounded by staff who served her but never truly knew her. Conversations were polite, distant, and transactional. People loved what she represented, not who she was. Compliments felt hollow, friendships temporary. The more she had, the less real everything felt. She longed for simplicity, walking freely without security, laughing without cameras, being someone without expectations. She envied ordinary people in ways no one could understand. They had freedom to fail, to choose, to love, without consequences. She often wondered what it would feel like to be valued for her heart instead of her inheritance. Despite her father's dominance, she wasn't cold. She was kind, curious, and deeply emotional beneath the surface. She cared about art, small moments, and quiet conversations. She wanted authenticity, something money couldn't manufacture. Yet every attempt to step outside her golden cage was met with resistance. Disobedience meant punishment, not always loud but always effective. Her father's control was subtle and terrifying. He never raised his voice, never made scenes. He simply removed privileges, closed doors, and reminded her who owned the world she lived in. Fear wasn't enforced with anger but with consequences. She learned that challenging him meant losing everything she'd ever known. Still, something inside her refused to disappear. A small rebellion lived in her heart, growing stronger with each passing year. She didn't know how or when, but she believed that one day, something, or someone, would break through the walls built around her life. When she finally crossed paths with a boy from a world her father despised, she felt a connection so real it frightened her. For the first time, wealth meant nothing, and power had no voice. She didn't yet know that loving him would cost more than money. It would demand her freedom. Their worlds were never meant to touch, yet fate brought them together in the most ordinary place. No cameras, no guards, no headlines, just a moment that felt real. He didn't know who she was at first, and she didn't tell him. That was what made it special. For the first time in her life, she was simply a girl, not a billionaire's daughter. And for the first time in his, he felt seen without judgment. Their conversations were awkward at first, careful and curious, built on honesty rather than image. They began meeting quietly, choosing places where money couldn't announce her presence. Small cafes, public parks, late-night walks where the city felt human again. She listened to his stories of struggle and survival, not with pity, but with respect. He spoke about his mother, his dreams, and the fear of never escaping poverty. She spoke about loneliness, control, and living a life decided by others. Each shared truth stitched their hearts closer. Love grew slowly, tender and dangerous. He knew the risk, even if he didn't fully understand the power behind her last name. Every time he stood beside her, he felt like he was trespassing in a world that would never accept him. Yet he stayed, because what they shared felt rare and pure. With her, he wasn't invisible. With him, she wasn't owned. They kept their relationship hidden, not out of shame, but survival. Exposure meant destruction. She learned how to lie gently, to slip past security, to steal hours of freedom. He learned how to walk into expensive spaces without flinching, though every glance reminded him of his place. Fear lived between them, but so did hope. There were moments of doubt, nights when he questioned whether love was worth the humiliation he knew was coming. Moments when she wondered if she was being selfish, dragging him into a battle he could never win. Arguments were quiet, emotional, filled with tears rather than anger. Neither wanted to hurt the other, yet reality pressed harder with each passing day. Still, they dreamed. They talked about a future far away from billionaire towers and broken streets alike. A life built on simplicity, honesty, and choice. Those dreams kept them alive, even as danger crept closer. Unknown to them, eyes were already watching. Information was being gathered. Power never sleeps, and billionaire empires do not forgive disobedience. What they believed was a secret love was already becoming a threat. And when love threatens power, power responds without mercy. The world they tried to escape was preparing to remind them that some lines, once crossed, demand a painful price. The truth didn't explode all at once. It surfaced quietly, pieced together through surveillance reports, whispered conversations, and a father who missed nothing. When he finally knew, there was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation, just a cold decision made behind closed doors. In his world, problems were eliminated, not argued with, and the poor boy had become a problem. The first strike came without warning. The boy lost his job overnight, replaced by someone more suitable. Then his landlord suddenly demanded payment he couldn't afford, threatening eviction. Friends who once greeted him warmly began to avoid him, their excuses thin and rehearsed. He didn't understand at first, only felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. Power was tightening its grip. Then came the humiliation. He was summoned to a place he didn't belong, a luxury office where glass walls reflected his cheap clothes and exhausted face. The father didn't insult him with anger. He dismantled him with calm precision. He spoke of class, worth, and reality, reducing the boy's love to a temporary fantasy. Every word reminded him how small he was in a world ruled by money. The message was clear: disappear quietly or be destroyed publicly. His past was investigated, his struggles exposed like weapons. The father made it known that one phone call could ruin him forever. No future job, no stability, no dignity. Just silence or suffering. She was trapped in her own nightmare. Her phone was taken, her movements restricted. Trust was replaced with supervision. Her father framed the punishment as protection, claiming he was saving her from embarrassment and regret. He offered her a choice that wasn't really a choice, obedience or exile from the life she knew. When they finally saw each other, it was brief and painful. Security watched from a distance. Words failed them. She cried, blaming herself. He tried to be strong even as his world collapsed. He knew that fighting back would only make things worse for her. Love suddenly felt like a weapon being used against them both. The pressure became unbearable. Every step he took felt watched. Every call felt monitored. The city that once ignored him now seemed hostile, controlled by invisible hands. He realized that courage alone couldn't defeat a system built on unlimited power. The billionaire had won the battlefield without ever raising his voice. And standing at the edge of ruin, the boy faced a devastating truth. Sometimes love doesn't lose because it's weak, but because the enemy is too powerful to fight. The end didn't come with closure or justice. It arrived quietly, like a door closing forever. The boy understood that staying meant dragging her deeper into a war she could never escape. Every threat made it clearer that his presence was the weapon being used against her. Love had brought them together, but now love demanded sacrifice. And sacrifice, he realized, was the only power he had left. He disappeared without a goodbye she deserved. No dramatic farewell. No final embrace. Just silence. He left the city with a small bag, an empty wallet, and a heart heavier than anything he had ever carried. Starting over felt meaningless, yet survival required distance. In walking away, he protected her in the only way billionaire power allowed, by removing himself completely. She felt the loss immediately. The mansion felt colder, the luxury suffocating. She searched for him in every quiet corner of her life, but power had erased him efficiently. Her father spoke of relief, of lessons learned, of futures restored. She listened, obedient on the surface, broken underneath. Love hadn't been defeated. It had been buried. Years passed. The boy rebuilt his life slowly, painfully. Not into wealth, but into stability. He carried the scars of humiliation and loss, yet they shaped him into someone stronger, more aware of how cruel the world could be. He learned that dignity sometimes means knowing when to walk away, even when your heart screams to stay. She fulfilled her role perfectly. Public appearances, strategic relationships, a life that looked flawless from the outside. But something in her never recovered. She loved others politely, carefully, never deeply. The boy had shown her a version of life that was real, and nothing afterward could compare. They never met again. No reunion, no miracle. Just two people forever changed by a love that challenged power and lost. Yet in losing, it revealed a truth the billionaire could never control. Money can separate bodies, erase names, and rewrite futures, but it cannot erase what love once awakened inside the heart. And in that quiet, painful truth, their story lived on, not as a victory, but as a reminder of what power can take and what it can never own.